Welcome everyone to the 333rd weekly MLP Drawing School live critique stream. It's July 19th. We got a small horde with us today. Oh my gosh. Lined up today we got an Alley Claw.
Hello.
There's a CPC hiding in a ball pit somewhere. We got a Vex.
Hello.
And a Pixie.
Oh my god.
Oh my gosh,
Pixie
he
got
became a
rabies.
Shurgorth.
Well, time to pwn him down.
Yep.
Life of an artist.
I hate it. Yep. Artist rabies hit.
As always, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. If you have any art you'd like to submit, we might have space. We aren't sure. It might be filled up from a ball pit. We'll figure that out. If you have any art, submit it to Soldier Point. He will critique it for you. Done.
Yep, perfect.
All right, so let's get to work here. Top left-hand corner, we have a picture by Scrash27. Ooh. Trixie and Starlight. It's my first attempt doing it in manga mode. That's why there's two versions. So he chose the manga mode because you mentioned it.
Ooh,
manga mode.
So it's got the screens on it. Yeah.
Oh, very
I need
nice.
to pull up a reference.
I like it. Good job.
All right, critique done.
Do they
Did
have any?
No questions.
Yeah.
So, for your next picture,
All right.
critique. Or, more specifically, we're looking for some assistance on these critiques. We are not mind readers, despite what we tell people. We are looking for questions. And this is not just us, this is the royal we. This is every single person critiquing your art. We are looking for questions. What that means is, what was bothering you about the picture? What are you trying to accomplish in your current art struggles? Where are you trying to push your art? What elements in it has been too complex for you? And what do you want to tackle next? These types of questions we love. You know, it could be as simple as, how do I make my hatching work for this type of manga drawing? Or how do I make shadows work properly in this type of manga drawing? Or even things like, I can't quite get a muzzle. How do I muzzle? We love questions like that because it gives us something to answer. We know what we're going after with you, rather than just throwing darts at a wall and hoping the critique sticks.
Mm-hmm.
So please, please, please ask questions about your art, because critique is a conversation. We can't have a conversation with a wall, no matter how many times I tried during the pandemic.
Yep.
Oh gosh.
So, at this shoulder up here, I tend to flare it out a little bit, make it larger at the where it connects to the body. I think something that is also throwing me off a little bit is how much this head goes back here. Just it makes a lot of a curve here, which is fine for some poses and stuff, but for this one, I kind of almost want this pony. Trixie is kind of leaning forwards and all that sort of stuff. You'd kind of either want Starlight to be mostly sitting stable, or kind of to have the rest of her motion kind of pulled back as well in this kind of a way. So I just brighten that up a little bit, clean up the leg, and I've also added a little bit more direction to these hooves, the end of these hooves here, kind of like you have with the front hooves and other hooves of Trixie here. It just looks a little bit more pretty, have it that way. But yeah, it's good. I like it. Add a little bit of an extra ear at the back here.
So I'm interested, and I wish you were here to answer these questions. With your shading you've done, did you just apply an overlay to get this sort of cross-hatching manga-like pattern going on here? Because I see some of it there, but then if we go and like look up towards Trixie's face, we can see that it's sort of feathered in. That's tends not to be the way that manga uses cross hatching. They tend not to fade into it by using like an eraser to erase away the cross hatching. It tends to just sort of dither out. When you're approaching this and trying to draw from your sources, like draw from other known objects such as manga, I highly, highly suggest grabbing references, specifically references of things you like to look at, things that you are trying to get your art towards. It doesn't even have to be pony. That's the beautiful thing about art. Art is art is art. Doesn't matter the character, it's art. So if you're to go, grab, I don't know, Naruto magazines or comic, manga, whatever, you could use that as your reference for how they've built up their shading, how they've built up their cross-hatching, how they've built up their characters and lines, and you can use those as your references for informing how you draw out your picture. Don't be afraid of them references.
Yeah, references are good. So having a bit of a look at the original like full res picture on Reddit, it seems like they're doing using something like the Clip Studio layer mode to do it, which like makes it look all pretty. But the important thing is when you're doing these kind of manga filters and all that sort of stuff, if you want it to look to match the style, most of the shading has to be done with this. So for example here, the shading is just fairly uniform, fairly smooth. It's all non-textured and all that sort of stuff, and the manga-ish kind of shading is almost like an overlay over here, so it doesn't end up looking as unified as you might want it to be. But that's just something to work on in future pictures. Yeah, you can see someone adding some more intense shading.
Yeah, since they're so close to this light source over here, it's the moon, obviously it's not that close, but it's close in the picture. There's going to be a lot more of an intense shadow than you have going on here, so don't be afraid to push those values a little bit more, because it all just sort of looks... There's not a lot of shading going on, which this close, it would be very intense shading, so even darker probably than I'm going right now. Would be better, just to really define all of those shapes.
I
Yeah,
think it's something to think about even in manga. The contrast is very stark in mangas. I'm just scrolling through a bunch of images now, and even in the official My Little Pony manga, all of everything against each other has a very stark contrast. There's no fuzzy or blur, especially even looking at effects pages. There's this one for the pony the superhero versions of the ponies. I forget what they're called, but there's this nightscape with a gradient on the buildings, and even that isn't super soft. It's all of it has a very stark feel to it. Stark contrast, I should say.
Heck yeah. Don't be too afraid to lighten up these areas as well. To what are those things called? The clouds. Yeah, the clouds around there. don't be too worried to, like, add some more lit areas and all that sort of stuff, because these clouds are going to be lit up by the big moon, but also by this big rockety thing. So you can add a little bit more, like, parts of the clouds that are facing towards that light source would be like a little bit more lit, and parts that are facing away could be like less lit, almost. Good way to, like, add some direction and all that kind of sort of stuff to your clouds. Make them look like they're like 3D shapes and all that.
All right, shall we move on to our next lovely piece?
Heck yeah.
Vex, I have an important question. Why you started a cloning program?
This is not important to you right now.
Okay.
Okay.
Next picture up is by Blockle. Spent some time to redraw one of my precious pieces. Though it didn't change much, I've incorporated all the new skills I've learned since then. Background is still under work, but I figured I'd gather some feedback first.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
Beauty.
When we compare
I
this
love
to the
it.
original, mwah.
What was that, Allie?
Oh, I was just wondering, have we seen the original before?
Yeah. We critiqued it a while ago. If you want, here's the link to the original. It's the second picture there.
Thank you.
Yeah. That picture.
I like to see. Oh yeah, look at that upgrade. Look at that glow up.
Yeah.
Glow up.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's really good.
So that's a month.
Wow. First of
That's
all,
crazy.
congratulations. That's crazy.
Yeah, for real. This is like so. I'm just like, I keep flipping back and forth to look at all the little bits that changed. I'm like, damn, you put in the work. That's really
Yeah.
awesome.
Man, that cotton
That
candy
is-
tail.
Dancing. As they're like dancing, I'm trying to figure out how would they be like moving. Like, would this hair be kind of coming around this way, and this be? Because the
I can see
positions
what you're
of these
going
two don't
for.
kind
Like,
of, yeah. Because this is a very dynamic kind of pose. So I want the hair to reflect and reinforce that. So let's just do something like this for now.
Come on, Aggie. I think there's too many me's.
Every single one of them has a separate layer. So it
Yeah.
might be
Oh
slowing
no.
you down.
Fine, they're just watching.
and these dancing pieces, the thing with like, so we're not doing an animation, so we can't use the animation itself to sell the flow of everything. But in like art pieces, we were talking about the mane and the tail earlier. These are kind of things that have secondary movement, and we can capture that secondary movement and give it so much motion because it's kind of like the body itself is performing the first movement, and the hair will be following along as the secondary movement. So we can kind of sell the idea of like the hair is moving from the place they were at to where they are now. So you kind of have that like you're selling the idea of the movement. How many times I can say movement in a
I'd
bunch
kind
of
of
statements, but
I'd kind of almost think about maybe you could have like this close leg behind this other leg, like they're like, coming around, swinging around in that kind of direction to kind of emphasize the movement a bit. But that's no stress,
Mhm.
just ideas. It something that I'd recommend when you're like getting reference for these kinds of like dynamic actiony poses and all that sort of stuff. Get like a YouTube video of like people dancing or whatever, and then just pause it um, halfway through the dance, because looking at those kinds of references instead of just googling people dancing stock photos, um, pausing videos will actually like let you see what it looks like when people are actually halfway through the motion, and so those can be really useful. Something that can also be really helpful is this concept called line of action. So through these kind of dynamic poses and all that sort of stuff, what you'll tend to have, um, or what you can use is a big main line, no pun intended, big main line going kind of through your whole pose. That all of the elements, like the mane, the head, different parts of it, can all be aligned on. So, for example, if someone is jumping, you might do like a line of action similar to this, and then have their hooves be like this, have their head be like on that, and have the body be like similar kind of like thing. Lines of action are just really good for like are really good for these kind of like poses where characters might be moving quickly because it looks pretty natural in terms of posing and all that. But I like it. Looks great. 100. You can see like the glow up and just how much more amazing the picture looks and all that sort of stuff. You have someone drawing arrows and stuff. Look at that.
I was just playing around because like I'm thinking of uh having a main line of action where the flow of the body could maybe like swoosh up and the tail can kind of have a little flick at the end here, but also your head can be swooshing that way as well, and you kind of build on them together, and the hair can be like trailing behind the tail, kind of swooshes off this way. And it's kind of like loose and messy to kind of get the whole feel. Maybe I even tuck this back and I have the front hoof be like the forward thing, and we get little like raise here, like oh yeah, groove groove. And then tuck one in here. It's all very messy. It doesn't This is just figuring out a flow, so it doesn't need to be anatomically 100%. At least that's how I like to approach it, because if I try to be too stiff and correct, then I lose all of the action in trying to be perfect anatomy-wise.
Yeah,
And
100%.
you can even have some of the hair like trailing forward a bit, still the eyes closed, like, oh yeah, having a great time. Big old smile that looks weird, but it's fine because we're just figuring out the flow.
Heck yeah. On the front of the hooves, I really like do the little either like the full cloven hoof thing or like just like a little thing that almost like kind of indicates where the front of the hoof is. But I love it. Look at that pony raving. This feels like a very a much more chill dance. This pony is like just taken a bunch of ketamine or something. They're just off their head.
But
But definitely feel free to chuck us more stuff. And if you want to, you can also just chuck us more of what your under sketching and planning lines look like, because that can be really helpful in terms of working out stuff to suggest and all that. But no stress.
All right. Shall we move on to our next one?
Let's do it.
Heck yeah.
All right. We got this cutie little horse, and it is by Amazing Lifeguard 641. Any tips on shading and drawing hair? Any other feedback is appreciated as well.
Yay, asking questions.
This one, right?
Yeah.
Yep. I love it. I love how the hair is drawn and how the shading and stuff is done. It's great.
I love the white eyelashes. Those are fun.
Mm-hmm.
So, questions about shading and drawing hair. I mean, overall, I think your hair is done pretty well. It's quite voluminous, quite large, at least towards the back. As someone's pointing towards the top, could be a bit taller. Match that volume, but really, hairstyle is weird. I mean, mullets are a thing, and that's more party in the back than the front. So, hair's allowed to be hair.
Is this CPC drawing this stuff?
No, that's me.
Oh, okay.
I'd be really interested in what type of shading you're trying to do. Because we got some soft shading around the neck, and then we got some like harder shading coming towards the wing there. But then the rest is sort of just the blotchy, soft shading going on. Sort of a mix between painterly and soft shading.
So in terms of the shading stuff specifically, I really like what you've got at the moment. Something that I want to point out that is really fun and interesting is these little patches of more saturated area. Those are really good. Keep those up. Those are something that people miss a lot. In general, I think the shading looks pretty good. The thing to keep in mind when you're looking at shading and when you're doing shading is the purpose of shading is to illuminate the form. So, if you've got a ball here, the reason why you do the shading is to show off the shape of that ball and to kind of almost reinforce what shape that ball is to make it easier to see. And it's exactly the same when you're shading ponies, when you're shading, planes or whatever. The reason why the shading is there is generally to show off the form, the 3D shape of it, and all that kind of sort of stuff. So when you're trying to practice shading and trying to work on shading, it can be really useful to just not worry too much about the very pretty, the very nice kind of like different colors and all that sort of stuff, and the soft shading and all that sort of stuff, and to shade generally in pretty hard lines, and just worry about the value, so how dark or how light the colors are. I found that when I do some figure drawing and all that sort of stuff, and I found that when I started shading with like exclusively like harder lines and shading out areas in like almost like cell shading kind of things, that really helped me understand how to illuminate form better. But that's just some tips for while practicing. No stress. Vex, do you want to explain some of this stuff?
Yeah, so I explained this before. I think it was in the last stream, but hair typically comes from, at least with this hairstyle you're doing, you're going to want to think of it coming from one source on top of the head and then exploding out from that source. Your hair doesn't flow directly from the where it connects to the head. It comes up a little bit and then curves back down because gravity's pulling it down. So a good way to think about that is think about how it would sit on just a sphere, just a round ball, and how a piece of fabric or fur or something like, hair would sit on a round piece of ball. So uh, that's kind of how I visualize it here with my lines. Is when I'm drawing hair, I think of it as a bunch of little lines shooting off of the head and then curving back down because gravity's pulling it back down, and it'll curve. Typically go along. Where is my pen? Hello? No? All right. It'll typically follow the curve of the head. You can put a little bit more poof on it if you want it to be a really poofy hairstyle. It's part of stylization. You can do that however you want. Just keep in mind, don't take it too extreme or else you start wondering, what's going on under the hair, how big you start losing track of this circle here and the shape that it's supposed to be laying on top of. So just something good to keep in mind. This is how I do hair. There are so many tutorials out there on how different people do hair, but remember, it is affected from gravity. Typically, it comes from one source or a series of one sources. So just have it flow from that direction, following the shape, the 3D shape underneath it.
Yeah. Heck yeah. In terms of like coloring and that sort of stuff, I love it. Coloring is great, especially in these kinds of areas where like you have everything more in like the gray area and you're not too worried about like, 15 hues and all that sort of stuff. If you want to get a bit more technical and get a bit more like theory wise about coloring and that sort of stuff, what I can recommend is Marco Bucci, Bucci. He's got a series called 10 Minutes to Better Painting on YouTube, and that's a really good watch for kind of getting some more theoretical knowledge and all that sort of stuff. And on our site, mlpds.art, under the beginner guides section, there's a tutorial about hue shifting, and that might help explain a little bit more about how colors change in lit and shaded areas. If you want to, run through those resources could be helpful. But what you're doing right now is really fun and interesting, so don't stress too much. Don't feel like you need to strictly stick to what you learn from any source, because you're on a good track at the moment. But good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, shall we move on to our next one?
Heck yeah.
All right. Keep up the good work. So our next one up is by... I'll find it. There it is. Lucy Two Sticks. Artwork first. Like I don't even care. I think I did a fantastic job on this one, but honestly, I need help with the expression.
Expressions. I was just watching a video on that earlier, so let's see what I can remember.
Brilliant. Also, thank you for asking us a question.
Yes, thank you, everybody who has been asking questions. Those are incredibly important to us and help us kind of understand what you're having difficulties with.
For just one question a day, you can help out MLPDS.
We can do way more for you than just you submitting the picture.
In the arms of an angel. Oh. Wonderful.
All right, so I guess a few questions for you in exchange for your questions. What expression were you trying to go for? Because for what we're seeing, you've done a pretty good job of making it a pretty like happy, neutral expression. So you've nailed it here. Is that what you were going for? Were you wanting something more expressive? Were you struggling somewhere with a certain part of the face? Because it looks fine to me, but just a couple things maybe if you want to add them. Eyebrows are incredibly helpful for dictating expression. Even if you take the eyebrows out eventually, visualizing where they are on the face can be incredibly helpful for visualizing what the expression is meant to be. Mouths as well. If you want them to be the expression to be more expressive, it's good to exaggerate everything on that image or everything in that expression. The more exaggerated it is, the more intense the expression, whether that's a good or a bad thing. So if you just wanted it neutral, you've done a pretty good job. If you wanted it more happy, higher eyebrows, bigger eyes, smaller pupils, can give you like several different expressions.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Something that you can keep in mind is that expression isn't just the face. So you've got these ears here. These ears are super useful when you're looking at like expression stuff. So like for happy and excited kind of thing, I'd almost like expect the ears to like be going out, like diverging from the head a little bit, like doing something like this. That's a bit much. But you can also bring the expression down into the body. Like you can have like hoof up in excitement. Maybe this hoof is like placed halfway through here and all that sort of stuff. Mess around a little bit, like it can be useful to like look at just Google search happy dogs or happy cats and see what cats and dogs look like when they're happy and excited. How it manifests in their bodies and all that sort of stuff. You might have like a super excited pose like this. You can do all sorts of weird stuff. So feel free to mess around with the pose and with the rest of the body as well, because the expression and the emotion and all that sort of stuff affects everything. And it's also just fun to mess around with poses. You can do a lot of weird stuff with them.
Something smaller I was also thinking about is we talked about all the bits of the face that can be used for expression, but you also have to remember they're all connected. So as a face moves, like try to smile and not move your cheeks. It's practically impossible. They're gonna press up against your eye and you're gonna kind of get that classic little raised eye here, even if just a little. And if it's not like a genuine smile, that's where we kind of get this like pained grin where they're like forcing a smile out and it's not affecting the eyes at all because it's not really like a true happy smile. And it's just subtle things like that. Like any part you move, like if you stretch your eyebrows up, your eyelids will also be stretched with them, and as well as down, and all those sorts of subtle things. So when you're thinking of what you're moving, don't forget the things around it that also get affected.
Heck yeah. Yeah, just a couple of like little example poses that like feel happy to me.
Yeah.
But I like it. Feel free to toss us more stuff and ask more questions as well. Because asking questions is really good and helpful.
All right, on to our next horse. This one is submitted by Supermarine Spitfire, and it's for NATG 2022, Day 15. Drawing a ponyfied version of my favorite book, game, etc. Draw a scene that you'd love to see in a show. I believe this is Dyson Sphere. So, fun game. A lot of grind.
Nice. Mm-hmm. Oh, yep.
I love the curve that you have going on in the background here. That's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
I also
to
love
see.
the shading you did up here.
Mhm.
Like all the little bits, what hits light and what doesn't. That's really well done.
So,
yeah.
self-reflection. The planet is much more abstract and undetailed than I'd like. Trying to make it look more realistic would have consumed the majority of the day. So that's a non-starter. Sunny lacks depths. She's supposed to be sitting down, but that's not exactly obvious. And I wanted to show both exterior and interior views of the Dyson Sphere components. Lighting and shading is supposed to be indicative of which one is which, but I'm not confident that message was conveyed. Okay. Bold.
Yeah, it's hard to it's hard to express that kind of a thing.
Trying to comprehend like which side we are seeing on some of these pieces.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of it might just come from the fact that the outer circle you seem to have drawn here isn't a perfect circle. So that might be confusing, like which direction they're supposed to be facing. Also,
Mm-hmm.
this one up here kind of overlaps the other one, which makes it visually a little bit confusing.
Yeah.
So maybe just try to draw some basic spheres. That might help with understanding the depth in there, at least how they might curve around it. But go ahead.
What you've got here in terms of the overlap is really good.
Mm-hmm.
Push that more though. So instead of just having like the tiny little bit of like, okay, let me erase this kind of stuff. So right here, it's hard. They're overlapping, but it's hard to say like whether this one is overlapping the dark area or this one's overlapping the light area. So what you can do instead is do something like this, but then have this like light one kind of extend all the way there to make it like really obvious which is overlapping which. What can also be really interesting and useful is these you've got these like planning lines, which I believe is something from like the game. You can have more of those. So, you know, have more of them show off like the curvature of the sphere and all that sort of stuff, and have them like overlap these ones that we're seeing the inside of more dramatically. This thing is like the big focal point. It's like the big thing that everyone is going to be like looking at and trying to work out and all that sort of stuff. So I'd recommend just, open up your notebook or whatever to a page and just try to like draw basically beach balls. Try to work out how you can get like spheres looking proper and nice and interesting and kind of all that sort of stuff. Yeah. In terms of like, the planet not being as detailed or whatever as you like, that's perfectly alright because you don't need everything to be properly perfectly detailed. What you can have is you can have just this area, just the focal areas. So like this point around here, maybe a little bit of this point be detailed, and then the rest of it can just be like as much of a nondescript, unimportant kind of areas you want it to be. So putting your time and your effort where the focus is really good. I think I've gone to this more in like other installments of the MLPDS dream, but some ways that you can kind of get everyone to focus on the important areas is to make these unimportant areas a bit less saturated, so a bit less full of color, a bit less kind of interesting to the eye. Up here I'll do something like similar, a little bit less saturation, a little bit less importance. And as you make like the focal points more detailed, your eyes will generally, and the eyes of the viewers will be like pointed towards there, because we like detail when we look at pictures. It's what our eyes like looking at.
As far as also detailing the planet itself, when placing objects on a surface, I think the easiest way to sell that, because you said there was issues like Sunny doesn't seem like she's sitting there, or etc. Just adding a little vague drop shadow, because obviously this is our center light here. Let me get a better color. We have this big bright thing being our light, and what we can do is we can be like, okay, this is gonna hit that, that's gonna hit that. We can draw all those fun lines, and just like the simplest little drop shadow I added to anything that's kind of majorly connected, and even the far off stuff, you can just add just a hint of a drop shadow, and to me, it already feels like, oh, okay, I feel like it's sitting on the surface that much more now, and it also kind of I think helps push sight towards Sunny, especially if we have like a very more interesting shadow for her, like adding in her tail here to give it more of a unique thing than just like a pillar shadow behind her. Just little stuff like that I think can sell something being attached to a surface like super quick and not a lot of detail.
Yeah, 100%. Something that I use when I'm like looking at lights and all that is like if you're trying to make a shadow for this kind of thing, you can trace a line along like curve, and then what you do is you make a line from the center here to the top there, and then wherever that hits is where like the shadow ends, kind of thing. Getting a little bit specific and all that kind of stuff, but yeah.
Interesting technique.
Yeah.
Hello.
You are in a tiny bit of a wind tunnel, but it's fine.
I'm sorry my fan is on. Apparently my mic is picking up the whole... Wait, I can do some magic. Boom. Hopefully Crisp is magic now.
It is.
Yay.
Oh,
hi guys. Sorry I missed my set. I love all the doodles. The art on this canvas is amazing today, so good job.
All very good.
All right, you ready to move on to our next picture?
Yep.
Let's do
I think
it.
our last one too.
Yeah.
All right, this one is by Nick _36667. New drawing of pony. Hopefully, I got better. Well, let's see your last
Pony?
picture. I would say, yeah, there's notable improvement.
We love it.
Share with the class.
Hey, one moment. Gotta load. There's the last one.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Heck
Let's see.
So one thing that is really useful is to break the pose up a little bit. You've got these two legs in the same place. You've got these two legs in the same place. You can do something like Zai's doing, and kind of have one leg kind of back here, and then have the other leg kind of forward, just to make it more visually interesting. But it is a lot better. Nice job.
I like your adjustments to the muzzle. This new muzzle shape is a lot more muzzly. Gives the face a bit more shape. Changes to the ears. Nice and fluffy.
So I'm going to drag that layer under. So
Yeah,
it's just above.
like
Okay.
all.
Yes.
There we go. There we go. We like it. I know I've got some previous stuff on the subreddit about constructing muzzles using boxes. But honestly, like at this point, just keep yourself interested in drawing and use references. You can look at there's a site that you can Google called Line of Action, and they specifically have an animal drawing tool, so you can select, equines, horses or like birds or dogs or cats, and you can just draw animals like that, and get a bit of an idea of kind of how animals look. And if you're interested, in our sidebar, there's a bunch of challenges, and there's also a challenge that describes doing drawing animals from reference, and has a little YouTube video to show you how to do it and all that sort of stuff. But you got a bunch of artists here doing their take on the face, how they construct the muzzle and all that sort of stuff.
I was just trying to move the face into relation to with the neck and the side and back of the head, so the ear isn't like invading the eye socket. But there's some lovely redraws happening on the side. Good stuff. I'm sorry I couldn't get this back leg working. I'm not very good at doing those legs. But it's like Pixie said, trying to break up the pose is a good thing.
I think the key question I have, is, especially with the face, is just what direction. It's always good to keep in mind what direction you want to face in, and if you want the more not necessarily like it, we do like to base it off a box, but not necessarily boxy, but like a more 3D muzzle that comes out of the face. You really need to pay attention to the direction in which the spheres of the face is facing, because there's a very big difference between the muzzle coming out from the side to even just like a slight turn, where like the eye would be more here and the cheek would be more hidden, and then even to a more stronger 3/4 where we would have more of the cheek visible on this side. So it's just really important to keep in mind the direction, because it will spin. It's like this giant almost, if you could think of it as literally a box on a sphere, and if you spin that sphere, you're going to see it change shape as you spin the head. So keeping in mind, if you want something that's more 3/4 facing or side facing, because I'm looking at your original drawing, and your ears feel like it wants to be closer to side facing, but your cheek is telling me it's closer to front facing. So different things like that to keep in mind. But yes, that's just what sticks out to me.
I like this pose happening, this little pixie pose. It's very cute. The pink drawings happening on the left, the very bottom one, for some reason just reminded me of Kirby, like doing full suction mode.
So keep it up. Keep drawing. Don't stop. More
You're
horse.
doing great. Very cute
Yeah.
horse.
Hmm.
All right. Anyone else have any other questions? Any other comments on this one? Going once, going twice. Sold. All right. I believe that's it. So thank you all for coming. We'll see you again next week. Goodbye.
Yeah.